Welcome to the Minimalist CEO podcast with Nate Lindquist. Nate created the Minimalist CEO method to help business owners redefine and grow their businesses by finding new demand in places they never thought to look, where there's no competition. By following his opposite thinking strategy, Nate's coaching clients have grown their business up to 40% in just 2 months and created tens of millions of dollars in revenue. Nate himself has launched more than 140 businesses. On the show, Nate interviews successful business owners and experts who share the secrets you can use to have a better business and a better life.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Nate Lindquist here with the Minimalist CEO podcast, and that's a wrap. I'm just kidding. We're minimalist, but we're not that minimalist. We're excited for another episode. We're glad that you're here. I hope you didn't accidentally just switch to another podcast, do another search. We got a good episode here, and there's no secret that we have great guests. People have done good things in business, have had gotten to the point where they've earned their stripes, and they've got some insights to share. Also, we like to challenge all of our guests. So to see what they've done to strip things away, focus on what's essential and create success. And hopefully while you're listening, you can find that gold nugget. It only takes one that gives you the breakthrough, gives you the insight, helps you move in a new direction, start something, stop something, whatever it is. But our guest here is the owner of Architecture EL. I'll let him explain what it is, but Kevin Rothschild-Shea, welcome to the Minimalist CEO podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you're here. And so we could make this really simple and just call you an architect, but obviously you've got a lot of things on your plate. Share what your expertise is. What's this business that you have, and what's the top problem that you solve in your business?
Well, architects, that's the focus of our life is problem solving, whether it's a design or fitting a pipe in a wall. But our focus is largely in multifamily housing with a special bent towards affordable housing. We really have enjoyed the opportunity to solve much needed housing needs and demands for those that are suffering deficits in their housing and residential life. And it's really an important piece to everyone's life to have a good, safe place to live and sleep and work from. So that's really become one of our core strengths and a core of our business. So both in design and as a kind of a mission statement, taking care of people and doing good design for people close to home where they live.
So how do you navigate that? Obviously, one of the marketing tricks that we've heard from day one is don't market to people without money. But if you're looking to help people create affordable housing, but you don't want to have your prices race to the bottom, are you working with developers? Are you working with investor groups? Who is your primary buyer? And how do you navigate that kind of a challenge, knowing that you're creating affordable housing in areas that may be underserved?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're working primarily with professional profit and nonprofit agencies, community development corporations, private development corporations that know the ropes. They know how to get the money. They know how to appeal to the HUD, to the state agencies, housing departments. And it takes years to go after these projects. A small multifamily or affordable housing project, 34, 50, or even 500 units, that could be on the books for 3, 4, 5 years. Sometimes the first 2 to 3, just getting the job funded and approved and off the ground, so we can actually put pencil to paper, or maybe must screen here.
Yeah, but you have to have a pipeline. You must have some projects that get into the race, that get into your sales funnel here. And you're talking about 3 years, 5 years, or sometimes even longer to be able to start the process, get the approvals, and be able to start designing.
Yeah, that's we have a lot of jobs in the hopper, and they take a long time. We have one we just permitted, and I think we started it, or it was the first call might have been 2 years ago. We just got local approval. Now with local approval, we can apply for funding, which could take 6 to 18 months. And then once it's funded, then we have to finish the drawings and then go build it. So we're still looking down the pipe at 3 more years. So
how do you, what does someone do when they're getting into architecture? Maybe they're 1 or 2 years into it. They've got, one project that they got their hands deep in the dirt, and maybe they got one pending. They're talking to a developer. How do they stay in business? How do you get enough projects going so that, you're not robbing Peter to pay Paul, or have the feast or famine that it seems to be very much the standard in the architectural field?
Yeah, it's purely, and then some of it, sometimes we're working on margins or waiting to get paid for 3 or 6 months because the developers don't always they're not fully funded either.
Yeah.
So sometimes we're participating in the development and then hoping to get the cherry on top, or at least come out of it with a job that keep you employed and funded for a couple of years.
So you're projecting projects that are going to pay you for months or years, and then still waiting for projects to come in that could be pending for months or years. You're waiting for retainage. You're waiting for funding from the banks. You're waiting for groups that said, oh, we're going to send you the check and we just don't have it yet. I mean, how do you, like, what, obviously, how long have you been in business, Kevin?
We've been since '08, so going on 14 years here.
Good timing, 2008. Like, how did the dynamic of the Great Recession affect this brilliant startup of Kevin Rothschild-Shea's business?
So the core of all this would be sweat equity, a little ambition, and a little bit of, we'll call it naivety, and we'll be generous, not then call me stupid. But
how many months did you have to live in a tent to be able to get this business off the ground?
Oh yeah, I started, so, the long saga. I think I was with a company for 18 years, and as all swan songs go, it was not meant to be. And I saw the writing on the wall, and I said, well, I'm just going to go do this myself. Mm-hmm. Started with a laptop on a kitchen table and pure sweat equity. Knowing your name, having good clients that just cared about me, not the company name, follow me. And then I wrote it out lean and mean for the first couple of years. It was rough.
You have kids? You married?
Yeah, I'm married. I have 4 kids.
Okay. That's cool. I can relate to that. I'm married. We got 6 kids.
Oof.
And beautiful life that we have. So, but there's being the provider, being the business owner, having the stress of a startup in arguably the
worst economy,
the worst industry, the biggest, most competitive, challenging space. I mean, I know a bunch of architects who called us because they're like, okay, now we're not getting paid. Now, at that time, I lost 2 of my clients who I lost had millions, tens of millions of dollars in notes that they weren't able to pay because they're developers. So they got all these foundations and all this marketing material. And guess what's happening with those foundations? They're just sitting there. Yep. And you get all these designers, the in-house engineers, not getting paid. And you're like, this is a perfect time. I think I'll open up an architectural firm. What were you thinking?
Well, you can imagine I probably was thinking I didn't have too many good choices. It was either suck it up and take an unhappy situation, which is a bad way to live, a bad way to role model for your kids, or take a shot and do something you know you could do. And you take a little bit of skill, a little bit of experience, and a little bit of luck, and you just grind through it. And, I admit I probably got lucky with a couple of jobs. When you're one person, you need that one job that carries you, which sets you up for the next one. And then it gets to be logarithmic over time. More jobs you have, the more experience you have, the more connections, the more calls. So then, when I went from 1 to 2 people, that was massive growth. I had to be able to, cut my hours from working like a maniac to then being able to manage a second payroll. But then every person you add after that gets easier and easier.
How many people do you have on your team?
There's 8 of us.
Okay. So, and you had to get out, get some money in the bank, buy some groceries, put gas in the car. What was the runway? How long did it take between taking the leap and getting paid, getting your first payment? And so you're like, I'm seeing scenes from like Jerry Maguire where he puts all the muffins on the plate and everyone's staring at the fax machine, waiting for the first deal to come in for his player. How long was that? How long did you have to hold your breath?
In the exit strategy from plan A to B, I probably had a couple months cash in the comfortable, cash in the bank. So it was probably.
Did you say a couple months?
Yeah, that's it. Okay. I'm not talking deep pockets or big cushion. So
incentive. You were motivated.
That's it. So I would say I think I left and I almost had, a couple small jobs right away. So at least I wasn't feeling like I was slipping backwards or treading water when I was getting things set up. Because, my setup costs were pretty modest. So I was lucky there. And then those turned into a couple others. And then I literally, in probably the worst of the recession, I picked up a job that carried me for an entire year. And without that, it might have been a completely different story.
But you were able to get the CAD software, get your office set up. What, work from home? It's at the beginning?
At the beginning, I worked from out of a den or the kitchen table, and then I moved to a pretty cheap, I think it was 6 months, 8 months, worked to a cheap artist studio out of a mill.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking like $400 a month rent, just brick walls, rusty old windows, a lot of fun artists and a lot of quirky people. And I think that lasted a year. And then, like I said, everything just kept on popping from there.
Yeah. So now, did you have to put on the sales hat at the same time? I mean, you were in every hat.
Oh yeah.
Sales, bookkeeping. Did you have any help in any of that stuff? Or was it like, listen, I just got to do it all? Opening mail.
I did all my own. Of course, in my past life, I had experience with in-house as a small firm that I left before. We did our own marketing, did all our own design, did our drawings, did the specs, experience with the contracts. The only thing I had, and I had experience with the bookkeeping and the finances as well, but I think I just started with a part-time bookkeeper who would just give me a couple hours a month just to make sure the books didn't go wonky on me, and then we just went from there.
I love with what you're sharing, Kevin, that you started at arguably the worst possible time in the last, I don't know, if you look over the last couple of decades, that could have been the worst time, and yet you kept things lean. You focused on what needed to happen. You kept the wheel turning, got some smaller projects in. At what point did, because I think of all the distractions that come up in business, was there ever a point where you found yourself working on the wrong thing, something that wasn't moving you forward?
Yeah, I think we all struggle with that. I don't know if I could point to any one specific job. And I have a friend that, talks about firing his best, worst client. This is my best client, but they could be a complete burden to the business, a constant draw on your time, and never feeding you financially or rewarding you otherwise. I've been lucky in that regard. I've had a few deadbeats and a few anchors on us. And then I've had a few people that were struggling, and I've kind of shown them some mercy and tried to help them out, because if somebody didn't help me and give me a shot at one point, I wouldn't be here where I am. So I've kind of shared some of that a little bit along the way.
So what size is your operation? If you could, give us a measuring stick. So we've got a lot of listeners here who have businesses that are doing $500,000, some that are just startups, some that are, who are listening are doing $100 million. So where do you fit into that?
So let's see. So we're on not the 100 million side of the spectrum.
You're a smaller business.
Yeah. So we're a smaller business. We're a Western Mass suburb. I think, for reference, it took me 3 or so years to 3.5 years to make my first $1 million or something, literally. Okay. And you can imagine starting in 2008 when you're trying to work and eat, right?
Mm-hmm. And so you've broken past the $1 million annual gross mark for the business, and you're past that sort of survival and stability mode. You're in that sort of consistent success mode, would you say, at this point?
I would say we are certainly in the consistent mode, but success is always a challenging measure. So I would say, for instance, that what took us that first 3 to 4 years to make, so we probably do about 1.8 or 2 a year. So right now this year, and every year is up and down, especially when you look back at the cash flow. Sometimes we're cash flowing 30, 60, 90, 100 days in terms of the work. So it's sometimes tough to see the exact picture.
Yeah.
So we've probably done the first $1 million by the first half of this year. So we're probably typically around 1.8, and it goes up and down pretty dramatically.
Do you ever feel in your business like you've hit a glass ceiling? Like you've kind of like, if I go try to get bigger, it might mean less profit, or just too much details or too much to manage? The
detail, maybe. I'm good with detail. You guys, you have to be in the trade.
Yeah.
I feel like the people aren't the dollars. My first experience, the first firm, we were actually smaller. We were 4 people, and we probably turned a higher profit margin because there was 4 of us that put our nose down and knew how to turn out a product.
Right.
Now I'm right in the mid-management. Right now I've got a little bit more overhead. I've got a full-time office manager, bookkeeper. I've got one guy that's half dedicated to CAD and technology and keeping the office growing. Mm-hmm. So you end up right in that midpoint where your margins actually can go down if you're not careful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Get really challenging. So, and the other side, I feel like I'm at the max because as as the owner, the leading architect in the firm, it's almost, there's like a ratio of like 1 to 4 or 5 that it feels like you can comfortably manage. So having 7 or 8 under 1 means I'm always jumping and hustling because there's not enough of me to go around, and then trying to keep each of those on track. And if I miss anybody, they could go off track for hours, days, or, God forbid, weeks, and burn time. So I feel like there's a lot more room to be efficient. I don't feel like growth helps unless you have, I think I'd need 2 strong people that could lead a project without question. And I don't know, right now, that's kind of not in the mix and doesn't fit our model.
Yeah, I think one thing we talk about at Minimalist CEO, and with over the last 30 years of making mistakes, and then the last 15, 17 years of, I started when I was 16, and really mostly just mistakes. But as I started consulting and then becoming the contract CEO and seeing the space between the, say, $1.5 to $5 million mark, the getting beyond that has always been a different definition of big for those who actually enjoy it. And so as I listen to what you're sharing, to me, this sounds like an opportunity to put some focus on leverage, looking at how you can have fewer inputs and greater ROI without necessarily having to add more people. So looking at the nature of your projects, looking at how your business provides service, I always find that there's a hidden something or other inside the business that's oftentimes dramatically more valuable than the actual service that you're currently offering. And it could be the way that you make your business a clearinghouse for younger architects. It could be the way that you help other people in the space. Obviously you're very knowledgeable at what you do, but I think it comes down to leverage. So I'll be curious to see where you go over the next 5 or 10 years, because the new definition of big can, for some people, big means more staff, more overhead, more stress, less margin. And you're kind of at that threshold right now where you get to make that choice. What are your goals? Where do you want to see yourself, if say a year from now, a year, maybe 5 years from now?
I know, getting old enough, the years go by fast,
Maybe you need an exit plan, sort of a package deal.
Oh, no. Well, as we were saying before the interview, when you start out, you want to plan your exit, right? Yeah. My growth is definitely want to see the right numbers come in, but the growth at my age, I really want to also, see the quality of the product and the quality of the design, and then have the dollars supported. Obviously, I want to retire. I want to be comfortable. Want to have some. But after, if you look at us generationally, what also happened with that recession is a whole generation of architects didn't retire, and then held on to the jobs that were out there, scooping those up. And then by the time the economy rebounded, the next generation's coming up. So now the next wave, and then us guys get stuck, or architects, we get in the middle space where there was this whole window, almost a generation of opportunities that we had to struggle to grab because the experienced old-timers that everybody always called on had the big name, had the firm, they were grabbing the work.
They're like, we'll do another 10 years because our investments just tanked.
Yeah. Oh, well, they had to. Yeah, they all wanted to. They were, all stalled. Their retirement plan was to either sell their business or rake in a few more good years, and instead everything was sucked dry. So then they had to hang around a couple more years to make it up and get back into position so they could have a comfortable retirement.
Yeah, I think a lot of businesses are facing that, and a lot of businesses are also facing people who don't want to work. And how do they get the help that they need? So I would love it if we kind of switch gears here for a moment. Could you share a failure or a challenge that unlocked success for you? So maybe even if it's a small win or a favorite failure that you might share, where you looked at it, you could maybe it took hindsight to look back and be like, that needed to happen. I know you shared the one of leaving the smaller firm that you were a part of and going out on your own. But I think we all have that, our favorite moments where we got knocked on our butt. And it's like, you know what, that really gave me the keys to a new insight, to a turning point of some fashion. Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that's probably one of the obvious huger ones, right? That was life-changing, right? And the biggest out of that, the biggest lesson there was, and I probably continue to struggle with, was the fact that I waited way too long, right? And in that, I gave way too much of my time, energy, and talent to somebody else. And that should have been mine and should have been mine invested. And that was, a painful lesson when you look back. Even when I was making the plan to transition, I still gave too much time and waited to jump.
I can relate to that in my own business in the marketing firm. It's like my business started to become black and white and everything outside of it seemed like full color. And I was seeking, and I was like, there's more here. And the thing is, I think became a slave to what I started. It's like I took advice from a 16-year-old, what I was going to create. And now that I had it, I was like, well, this is what I built. I don't want to lose it. But I waited too long too.
Yep.
And I got my butt kicked. But I look back at that moment, that epiphany that I had was like, I was scared to death. I had that. Did you ever have that? Did you have that moment where you're like, oh my God, I guess now I have to figure this out. And you're kind of like the cold sweat. How am I going to tell my family moment? Did you have that?
No,
you didn't have that.
So you would think, well, like even when I switched then, right? It's like we're talking life. My wife always says, oh, we don't take risks. I'm like, what are you talking about? Right. We went out and started a business at the worst time in the world. Right.
But going back to a job or a business that isn't serving you anymore, that's far more risky.
Yeah. True.
So what happened? What did you feel like? I mean, take us to that moment. What happened in that moment?
Honestly, when I see the reality is at the time, there was basically a couple options presented to me. And it was a little frightening because it completely upended the plan that was supposed to be there. You spent 20 or 10 years working towards a plan, and then all of a sudden the rug's pulled out from under you, right? Mm-hmm. And I had, after years and years and years of going down a path, I was given what I felt like a bit of an ultimatum, but basically I was given about 10 days to make a decision, which obviously didn't sit real well. And in that, I went back, not with the decision based on the two options that were presented, which was option C, or the new option, which then obviously led to my exit and my start. And that might have been the scariest thing, just having to just sit down and say, you know what, those are your ideas, but here's a new idea and this is going to hurt. And off I went. And the reality is I never.
And then you clench and you do it.
Yeah. And I never looked back though.
Yeah.
Never. I mean, we're talking years, never looked back, didn't doubt, no regret, no, might have been worried about paying some bills or hustling or making it work. But to that degree, I never looked back. And
doesn't do you any damn good, does it? It's like,
no.
Drive home tonight, or if you're home, drive somewhere drive wherever you're going to go in the rearview mirror. It's like something bad's going to happen. That's good. Well, I love what you've done. And I think I think that for me, it was a very scary moment, but it was like a 24-hour, like, I love to tell this story because you have to tell a story because everyone wants to have the marketing story. But the truth is, making that turn is messy. People are offended, people are hurt, they feel violated. It's like, dude, this is my life. I've got a family to take care of. What you laid in front of me or what's happening in this situation isn't going to work. I had people who were on my team. I brought in some very, very key people. One person was an economist and had a relationship with Disney and Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. I brought in some really high profile people to grow my agency, and things were growing. And I was like, I can't do it anymore. I'm done. And I started letting people go and saying like, taking time and a little bit at a time, saying, how can we find some work for you? And it was all of a sudden it was like, oh, 3 of my biggest clients just left and a merger failed. Then it was like sweat stinging my eyes, drove home, sat in the driveway for 6 hours. I never turned on the air conditioning. I never rolled down the windows. And I was like, this wealthy lifestyle, this sort of story, this big story that I created sort of crashed around me, and I had to redefine my identity. So, I think that, a lot of people talk about what they add to their business to make it better. And at that point, for me, that's when I started to have the what's in it for them? How may I serve? And it was more about what I was going to strip away. What could I do in that situation with almost nothing?
Yep.
I had $75,000 a month in overhead, 22 employees, 12 who were full-time. The rest were contract that were behaving as full-time, because they were really busy and that was our way of growing. And so it got to the point where it's like, what am I going to strip away? So I'd be curious in that moment. Obviously, along the way, there's a handful of things that you do have to not give attention to, that you have to say no to, that you have to cut away to win. And I'd be curious what jumps up for you that you had to strip away, that you had to not do, to get in your line, stay in your line, and make this business work.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the living lean is when you talk about stripping overhead and just what can you do when you're doing it yourself and you're just trying to figure out how you can get enough in the bank to keep the money flowing, especially those first couple of years. I mean, you're stripping away creature comforts, space, food, everything you're stripping away.
No going out for long lunches.
No, you're not. You're not. Are you eating lunch, right? Or you're
who needs lunch?
I mean, when you talk about stripped down to nothing, in those bare bones days, right? And that's the one thing that drives me is, right, I remember what it was like to not have work and go into the post office hoping to see a check in the mailbox because you had no dollars in the bank and you needed it for Friday so that you could at least get some money in your hands so you could pay your mortgage or get groceries in the house
and go home as if everything's okay.
And still live life and go to Little League, and try to take care of the kids. So those are daunting, and frightening things to face. And you're doing it seat of the pants, zero overhead. Like,
get to work.
We spend now in a couple of days, what I used to spend in a month,
It's, I was accused at that time of years later, I was accused of, I had a company that was doing millions of dollars in business. And I'd have months where we do, 150, 200, sometimes $300,000. At the time, in a marketing firm that I started to hate and started to sort of shrivel up. I'd say shrivel up. I ballooned to 206 pounds. I'm 167 pounds right now. And, I was really just sort of stressed out. You ever stand up from your work? You probably have, where your legs are numb. And you go to the bathroom and you're like, it's 4 a.m. Why am I still at the office doing this? And I actually have been there to the point where it'd be 3 days in a row. And I had a shower in one of my offices, but I would go in, shower, or not even have yet, be walking down the hallway and my staff's all coming in, getting in there, going into their offices. I haven't even left. And they don't get it. But this is interesting, Kevin. I was accused by people around me who were used to hearing and seeing things that look like success. As a father and a husband and as a parent and as a brother, sister, son, whatever it was, you don't run around telling people that things are going to hell. You say everything's going to be fine because your focus is on it's going to be fine. Everything's good. For me, I learned you don't talk about the stuff that's going wrong. You focus on what you're going to make right. And I had people say to me, why did you lie about your success all those years? It's like, shit hit the fan. My job was to make sure the people around me felt safe and knew that things were going to be okay. I bet you had to tell your wife and at the time, and maybe your kids, like, it's good.
Everything's fine. Oh yeah.
It's good. It's good. And you can't blame a business owner for doing that. And so I commend you for going through that, not looking in the rearview mirror. And I remember you talk about scantiest fare, sort of that stoic moment. I remember consigning and then selling my BMW for like a $300 loss and getting a $170 payment on a program, Ford Escape.
Yep.
That was like stripped down to nothing. And what's that?
Bare roll up windows, right?
Yeah. And I'm like, this is why I made the deal. I'm driving away, seeing my BMW, knowing that I'm losing $300 to do this. I had to put it on a Discover card that had just a little bit of money on it. And I remember putting it on the credit card and driving away thinking just everything was like, UHF. It's like, my whole life really sucks. The story that I had is not what I thought. And I'm driving home and I remember that's the air conditioning piece. But I remember like they said I wouldn't have to make the payment for 3 months because of the special deal. Don't pay for 90 days, no payments. And I'm thinking, I hope to hell
it's true
that I have one deal so I get to keep my car. And I was looking up, how long does it take? I had $7,300 in the bank, $75,000 in overhead. I have just lost just over $1 million. And my 3 biggest clients and a merger failed where I'm just, a merger fails. I was getting ready for the lawsuits. Like, who are my investors? Well, this is an ugly. I'd love to go back and make it look like a perfect story. And I know there's no such thing because I was there and I know it sucked, but it did give me the opportunity to see something in a different way, which was you don't have to have all the answers. There's people out there if you really take good care of people and treat people well and do good work and get to work and get all the other crap out of the way, you can build a business into a helping system. And it sounds, Kevin, like that's what you've done. So,
well, yeah, you like sound tip. We're perpetual optimists, right? Always hoping, planning, it's going to make the best thing work. And, even in our small business, wanted in the last couple of years too, the whole time. It's the first year of COVID, right? I think after the first COVID shutdown, right? I don't think we started a new job for 8 weeks. Not one new job. We're just burning through backlog. And you start wondering, well, sorry, now it's June and July. What are we going to start doing? And then you just start caring people. But, the important thing to your point about taking care of people and building people up and
doing what you say you're going to do.
And, we want to be successful and we want your people to be successful. But we don't have the answers. And if we weren't optimists or hopeful for the next job and the next opportunity, and we're still in growth mode, then maybe that's one of the things that kind of sets people apart from the ones that are in business and the ones that are maybe working for people that are in business. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's a time where a lot of people spend a bunch of time talking about what they're going to do. And then there's people like you, Kevin, who gets to work. So I dig what you've done. And, I think that you've been willing to, I look at the who and the how acronym. I landed on this at one point when I was writing my book, Excuse Removal Blueprint. And the concept is this, that if you are always saying, how am I going to do it? And you think you're the one who's responsible for everything that you've accomplished, you did have to do the work because you were there. But look at all the people around you. If you ask how, and you try to do it all yourself and think, I'm going to be the one with the answers, I'm going to be the one with the money, I'm going to be the one with the support. We don't realize these people aren't under you because they're less than you. They're under you because they're holding you up.
Oh, yeah.
And the how is huge, overwhelming waiting when it's all on you. But then you can switch it to who, which is who can help out. And clearly, we're turtles on fence post. I love what you've done. If you could share something with our listeners, now that you've gotten down this path and you're making progress, you have the opportunity to just put a message out there that tens of thousands of people are going to hear. And incidentally, it doesn't have to be about business, but just it can be about anything, but a message you'd like to share with a platform like this. I'd love to know what that would be.
Oh, yeah. I think just simply, if you have the desire or drive or want to do something, just to do it, don't, maybe it's cliche, don't listen to the naysayers, right? There's always those that have a million reasons why you can't do something, right? And those are the people that will never do anything. All you need to do is find that one reason to want to do it, even if it's just because you want to, or you find the one way to do it and you just do because that's just in your blood and you can't sleep at night and you can't live with yourself. And the money and success aside,
it's a dividend, isn't it?
Yep. It's better to take the shot, to try, right, than to not try and fail. So that's the one thing I would say is if you have the desire or drive, do what's in your heart. Do it because you want to. Do it because you have a talent for it. Don't do something because you think you're going to get rich doing it. Do it because you want to, and then all the fruits of your labor will follow.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. That's a great message. And I think that everyone has amazing gifts, and what a shame to hide them behind comforts or safety or ego or talking. Maybe, I look at the 90-pound woman who lifted the car off her son. How did she do it? She had a reason bigger than herself. And I'd be curious, what in your business was a reason as you made this turn? What was bigger than you that made it happen? Because obviously you had everything stacked against you.
Oh, boy.
I want to be an architect. I hope I survive. What was it that got you up when you were knocked down?
Well, probably having the family behind me, right? Knowing all the scary times, having the depth of support with family, just that one thing can make the difference. Carry whether you're conscious of it or not. Just have people there to support you can make a huge difference.
And you see yourself as a provider for them, so you're not going to let them down.
That's for sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, Kevin, thanks for being on the podcast, man. This has been great. And I think very insightful for people who might want to get started in business, people who are in business who are like, wow, I thought I had it hard. And, and I think you shared some great insights. I appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank you. My pleasure.
We went longer than normal, and I think it's because you were transparent and you shared some good stuff. So I appreciate it. I want to tell all our listeners, one thing that we're looking to do moving forward is just make sure that you subscribe and have access to the podcast, because we're going to be having some new solo casts. We're going to be having something every Thursday. We're going to be announcing pretty soon, which is free insight behind the scenes of some of our actual live coaching calls, live Zoom calls, where you can hear some of the challenges other business owners are having. You can hear some people who are ahead of you, some who are right where you are, and some who are behind you, and how they're having breakthroughs. So please subscribe, download this, pay attention to the Minimalist CEO on Facebook. Just go to the Minimalist CEO. And you can also go to the Minimalist CEO on YouTube, and you'll see the podcast. There's going to be a lot new content going in there on Thursdays. We're calling that the Turning Point Session. So the Minimalist CEO Turning Point Sessions. We're going to give you a peek in behind the green door, in this case, the orange and black door. And we're on a mission to help people focus on what's essential, to strip away the waste and the junk food marketing, to eliminate competition, not by getting rid of them, by really becoming fascinated with helping more people and understanding where they aren't getting the help. Peel the label off your industry, focus on the underserved, and help more people. That's the magic. So thanks for being here for the podcast. We will be here with another episode. Thanks to all our sponsors, and I appreciate you and that you're here. Send us your questions, help@theminimalistceo.com. Go be a minimalist CEO. Not sure how? Let me know.